We haven't had any at all for I, a lot of months. I'm not sure how long. It's been a long time. So I think it's good. The plants are super happy. They're green. And yeah, it's nice to have a little reprieve before the summer hits us in another month or two. So we're glad you guys are back and hope if you're tuning back in for the second hour today, we just wrapped up with Kelly John Walker. He is a freedom fighter. Can't say that very often these days, but he sure is against tyranny, against the DOJ, against all things that we know to be bad, watching the last 4 years unfold in America. And as Trump now is in office, he's going to be unraveling some more of those. And hopefully, Kelly John, his case, and the other parents involved will have some justification for, some help there, and they will get things sorted out in the next couple of years. So we will pray for them. And somebody just sent me a note after the show. They introduced me to another person who could maybe help his situation. So that's why I say we do this. If you guys hear of something that we talk about and you have resources that you can share with me, please DM me at Patriot_Mom007 on all the channels. You can chat. I'm not really doing chat. I have chat. I'm trying to do it, but I'm not quite there yet, you guys. So if you're chatting with me, I may not see it today, but eventually I will. Just these are like little baby steps for me on the technology side. But we're glad you're back. And my second guest for this hour is another really interesting American. You don't hear about all of them all the time. A lot of things overpower in the story, in the headlines, some of the less popular stories and situations that happen to fellow citizens in America. And Lisa Ekman's story is certainly one of those. I hadn't heard about her, and a mutual friend introduced us in December, just around America Fest, when we were there with Turning Point USA for 4 days. And we were there with Total News and with Grassroots 50, so check them out. But I didn't get to talk with her, but we have been in conversation since then. And her story is really great because it's firsthand account. Don't get that very often. A lot of anonymous sources going on these days and since 2020. So it's always good to have it straight from the person who lived it, right? There's no better account than firsthand. And she has a book out, Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites. You can find it everywhere, pretty much on Amazon, which they sell everything there, Barnes and Noble, and also it's Liberty Hill Publishing as well.com. So you can find the book there. It's very reasonable. And she's got a really great story. So before we bring her on, we are going to, of course, share a little news clip with you. Some of them I find that maybe haven't been talked about. This one, local, if I do a second show on Friday, I like to bring it back to Arizona. A lot happening nationwide, but we have a lot more happening here in Arizona. So this was a really great story. 202 people were arrested during a 12-day operation targeting human trafficking in Scottsdale, and a little slower on that scroll. And there's all agencies or several around the area of Phoenix, which includes Scottsdale, Goodyear, Surprise, Yavapai County, and Pinal County Sheriff's Office. They actually all banded together to catch these horrible, horrible people. 53 felonies, 149 misdemeanors. And so that was between January 22nd and February 15th. It's through the Scottsdale Department of Police Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit, or HEAT. And it was an operation to arrest sex buyers, child predators, and individuals involved with the sex trade and trafficking. And they did use decoys. No children were directly involved. So we do appreciate our law enforcement who are ever tirelessly working to keep us safe, and those who have already been harmed in these types of sex trafficking environments. They are working to keep them safe and save them actively. Certainly here in our state, and I know several other people. We have Craig Salmon Sawyer out here in Arizona. I would love to have him on the show so we can keep up and see what his organization is doing in this area. There are several. We had Sherry Lopez on a few weeks ago, Pearl at the Mailbox, also in Arizona and a good friend. And so, you do have to look within your area, your state, your towns to find out what's happening within those, because everything we hear is nationwide. but in federal, but there's so much happening on the ground right around your neighborhood. It's really good to keep informed of that as well. So with that, we just do a little clip of the day, but we do want to bring on Lisa Ekman. She's waiting patiently for me, and let's bring her in now. And Lisa, just thank you so much for being on American Perspective today with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk with you today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I saw you a couple weeks ago. You actually were on the Jim Price show. I'd introduced you to, and he had you on. He beat me to it, but he also encouraged me to do lives, which I've never done before. And I sat in for him for a couple days, and so I thought, well, if I sat in and did it for practice, then I want to do it for real. So here we are, 3 weeks later, doing it for real with you.
Excellent.
And I did watch some of your interview back, but I also like to hear firsthand. We all do, I think, accounts because I don't really want to just reiterate the information that I know about. I really just want to have a discussion with you when I'm learning it. That's the best
Sure,
way when
of
you're
course.
top of your curiosity at the beginning when you don't know anything. Or you think, otherwise, you think you know too much. So we're going to, we have the website. I do want to flash that up there, but your book came out just about a year ago in May of 24. Just so people know, paperback and ebook run between $8 and
It was another
$16. So
historic
very, very,
week
very
at the White
affordable.
House. Let's break it all down.
Oh, and we're going to take Carolyn off right now, but she's going to visit us later on today. But we do have a cover of your book to show on number 2. And there it is, Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elite with how I escaped the progressive cult. Oh, I didn't say that at the top. That's the important sentence. How I escaped the progressive cult. So this, just to recap, happened around COVID-19, or there shortly thereafter, I guess that was maybe a part of the catalyst. We'll find out. And you started questioning what you call as cult like devotion to the Democrat Party. So tell us kind of where you were at that time and why that sparked.
Sure. So I have to maybe give a little background just so people can understand how deep in the Democratic cult, as I call it, I was, or and the progressive cult. And I think it's important. I call it the progressive cult because they're not liberals anymore. They've gone so far radical beyond what a liberal was. That's part of what happened is I think you'll find a lot of former Democrats who will say, I didn't leave the party left me.
Mhm.
And that was sort of the case with me. What happened with me, I was a Democratic advocate and lobbyist. I worked mostly on disability policy, a variety of different ways. I worked in the United States Senate. I volunteered on President Obama's first campaign at his national headquarters doing disability outreach. I was the president of the Law Democrats at Georgetown University. And I give that as background just to kind of show I wasn't just an average Democrat. I was
You were in
up
it.
in the party.
You were in it. You were as in it as somebody could be, fully immersed, if you will, in not just the politics, the events, but the culture, right? Like as
Exactly.
thoroughly as you could be in all physically, emotionally, mentally, your friend groups, your after hours groups, your meeting groups, your literally daily life was the Democrat Party and all that they stood for, and then what they were morphing into in front of your eyes, I guess, is what happened.
Yeah, and it happened kind of slowly. I think it started way back with political correctness. I mean, I can think back to that, and I think if you think about maybe in the 80s and going into the 90s, well, they started with political correctness. And most people on the left were nice people. They didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so they tried to use language that didn't offend or make anyone feel bad. But none of us really took a second to figure out where that came from. And it's straight out of the Marxist playbook. It's straight out of Mao. It's straight out of ideological correctness. But it started to get us used to listening to what our Democratic Party leaders told us was acceptable speech. And we did see that really morph into cancel culture, where you could literally lose your job, have your life be canceled for using the wrong words. And so that was starting to sort of creep into my consciousness when everybody around me started putting pronouns in their email signatures. Fortunately, the people I worked for at the time did not require that, and I did not do that. But everyone around me did and would introduce themselves with their pronouns at meetings. And that was just, it made me uncomfortable, but I was still doing that work. And so kind of had to just go along with it a little bit. But what happened a few years before COVID sort of started to open my eyes to, I think, what we're now really seeing as we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at Health and Human Services with the MAHA movement, and that was the co-option of science, and that our medical, what I like to call two different things, our sick care system, because it's not about keeping us healthy.
Right.
It's about treating us, our symptoms when we're sick, and making lots of money off that.
Of course.
As well as what I like to call the medical pharmaceutical complex. You know, just like we have the military industrial complex, we have the medical pharmaceutical complex. And the way I really started to become aware of this is that both of my parents became ill. And I lost both of them, unfortunately, my dad in 2014 and my mom in 2016. Um, and I started to really question, what are our health agencies actually doing? Where is the science where's the data and evidence that they're supposed to be basing things on? And really with my mom, because she was diagnosed with stage 4 of an extremely aggressive cancer, where she was given the get your affairs in order speech. You have a few months to live. And she came to me and she said, Lisa, I don't want to die. I'll do whatever whatever you can find. So she still took traditional treatment. She had a hysterectomy and started her first round of chemo, but we also got her to a naturopath. She changed her diet. She got rid of all her toxic products. She worked on dealing with her stress and doing, guided meditations and all of that. And before she finished her first round of chemo, which was supposed to be 6 treatments, halfway through, her cancer was gone completely.
Wow.
No signs of cancer. And so really, what I learned is that cancer treatment hasn't really changed in 50 years. It's throw a bunch of poison, whether that be
Right.
chemo or radiation at it, and hope that the
You
healthy organs don't die as well. And my
exactly.
mom was cancer free for 2 years, and then had a little growth back at the original spot show up on a scan, took one chemo treatment, and died of kidney failure because the kidney fried her chemo, or the chemo fried her kidneys,
Yes.
pardon me. And so I sort of, was like, well, what are our health agencies doing? There's all this information about how important what you eat is, the products you put on your body, all of those things. And none of these are recommendations that are being made to people when they're diagnosed with cancer. We throw the most toxic things at an already over toxic, stressed
That's
person
right.
and hope they make it. So there were little cracks in what I like to call the dam holding the flood of truth back from me that the indoctrination and brainwashing had created. But I had to go back to work after that. And so I was back working with actually HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the House and the Senate, on disability policy. So I had to kind of push that aside. And then COVID happened. And at the beginning, I will, I'm not proud of this, but I will honestly say that I was just as scared as almost everybody on the left was. And some people on the right and independent thinkers were also, I think, pretty scared at the beginning. But my boyfriend at the time, he was not. And he and I were going at it every day, having heated discussions about what was real, what was true. But there were still things that didn't make any sense to me. These same agencies that I had started to question were recommending things that really didn't make sense if you want to keep people healthy. And my favorite one to use to explain is that they were telling us not to go outside. Remember at the beginning, if you weren't an essential worker, you were to stay in your house.
Yep.
Well, the best thing you can do for your health is get sun and vitamin D.
That's right.
So hide in your house, be afraid, and fear is very bad for your health and your immune system, by the way, and being isolated, very bad for your mental and physical health.
Yes.
So that started to create some cracks too. And then the censorship started. And I think I'll mention a point that is a big point I talk about in the book Deprogramming Democrats, and that is fear is the main mechanism that they use to control people in the progressive cult. And so the more afraid they can make you, the less you critically think. Because when fear takes over, you don't think. You
That's
don't
right.
ask questions. You say, make me safe. What do I need to do to make me safe? And therefore, you follow whatever authority tells you to do. So, I was, afraid, and I was living in Washington D.C. at the time in the district, and you could literally cut the fear with a knife. If people came out of their house, they were peering at you with terrified eyes over their masks, that they're wearing outside, which was another one that didn't really make a lot of sense to me at all, but terrified. So, then the censorship started, and you had things like the Great Barrington Declaration, which seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And there were tens of thousands of scientists and doctors signing it, saying, we really should treat this like we treat every other illness and protect the vulnerable, but let everyone else get back to their lives. And all that happened with that was censorship, fact checking, people getting put on the list of the disinformation dozen, which
Right.
that word triggered fear to me, disinformation, not because I said, wait a minute, in our republic with our First Amendment, the government doesn't get to use the word disinformation. They get to tell you what they believe the truth to be, and then you're supposed to be able to make up your mind yourself. So that censorship um, really started to create that crack, or start to pull that card out at the bottom of the house of cards. And then I had a particular conversation with my boyfriend, and I said to him, these people that I work with, Jamie, these people at the agencies that I've spent 20 years working with, I just can't believe they would do this to people without data, without evidence, without, having these conversations. And he looked at me and he calmly said, Lisa, if they'll poison our water, what won't they do?
Exactly. And we've been watching them do that for a long time. I mean, way back to Flint, Michigan, of course, and the other, even the train derailment that happened a couple years ago that we have not heard hide nor hair of, as if it never happened. That was contaminated lands. So they've been doing this for years, and then they just pretend like they're not doing it. But I do want to ask you too, more specifically, when you're in it and you're surrounded by it, it's, I'm sure, very hard to distinguish all the things happening that are red flags when you believe in it, of course, for all those years. But what were some of the real finer, when you really thought somebody said XYZ to you? And then who were these people? Like, what were the determinative factors that you really physically were like, whoa, they just asked me to do this, or they just said that out loud? Were there some moments like that that really were glaring that anybody would say, holy cow, that actually happened in real life? She experienced that?
Um,
Like, how,
before,
where are the indicators? Where are you seeing?
so I actually, in, I guess, my angels, the creator had I had started to not trust the system somewhat, because I actually got involved administering a small political action committee a couple of years before that. And that's where I was taking money and donating it to candidates and going to fundraisers. And I kind of got to see that side of DC that I hadn't for most of my career. And it became really, really clear to me how much whether or not you gave them money mattered, whether you mattered. I mattered as someone giving certain politicians money more than their constituents did, and that should never happen. That is not the way our system was designed by our founders. Um, but I had scheduled my retirement for March 1st of 2020. So if you think back to that, I had scheduled my retirement for right after the lockdowns hit. So once this all started, I was not working anymore. And so when we were having our discussions and our conversations, I was not working, but I saw all sorts of things like, I watched Anthony Fauci flip-flop on masks 4 times,
Right.
and I said, well, wait a minute. where's the data and the evidence in this? And then I immediately, when I heard about the 6 foot social distancing, I was like, oh, well, finally, we must have some science here. So I researched it. And as he's admitted now, he did in congressional hearings, I think in 20, at the beginning of 24, uh, there was no science behind it whatsoever. They just kind of made it up. It
Right.
just kind of appeared, is what he said. And so to me, I was starting to go, well, wait a minute, none of this is making any sense. And this is one of my favorites. Well, we're going to let you go eat at a restaurant. Now you got to wear your mask when you go in. But then once you sit down, of course, you can take it off. No science behind or data or evidence behind this at all. And so that I think really was really you know, kind of some of the last straws.
So
But
you're so really what you're saying is common sense won out overall, and you just had the self-realization without going over the bend. You hadn't gone around the bend yet, I guess. Some would say. I don't like to use that that word they use with the ZY at the end that identifies people's mental state. I don't like that word. Um, so you didn't go that far off the cliff that you couldn't reel yourself back just from looking around and paying attention for a second, a little bit from the outside in retirement. And so that's, I think, what people need to do is, sometimes they do need to take a step back. And when they're in it, like they are now, it's really hard to identify those flags that would tell you, whoa, this is not normal behavior anywhere. If we saw it in another country did it, we would, probably be sending US aid money over there to stop it. Frankly, that's what we would
oh
have
yeah,
done. We would
we
have
we
put
we might.
72 billion dollars at that if another country did it. Yet here we were doing destroying our own people from within, our businesses, our families. Kelly John talked on that. And so, I mean, you could see, so this is a pervasive problem. It's in all these areas, not just with the parental rights in school, but you as a functioning adult living your life, you're in these groups, they're going kind of sideways. Everybody's kind of following because that's your life, your existence in so many ways. And it does sometimes take you to step out of it, unfortunately, to really sit back and reevaluate. And then when you were reevaluating, how did you, so you had these like little clues, how did you go from being so in it to being completely as you are now out of it and saying what it was for those who are still in the cult-like atmosphere?
So I think it's important when I say it's a cult, it really is like a cult, and it is because of indoctrination through education. And I want to take a minute and kind of talk about that because I think it's really important. What happens when you go to school? Think about when you start school. The teacher is always right. Authority is always right. If you ask questions, you can ask questions to understand what the teacher is teaching, but if you question what the teacher is telling you, you get in trouble. You go to the principal's office, you might get sent to a different school, you might get put on medication. So the longer you spend in school, the more you get indoctrinated. And what it is intending to do is make you worship authority. Okay,
Right?
so a lot of people on the left, and I was one of them, do not have any religion or spirituality or connection to God. And so instead of you end up worshiping the government and authority instead of the creator. And so when that happens, you don't question anything they tell you. So it isn't you stop thinking, you stop asking questions, and you worship what authority tells you.
Right?
But the second part with the education that happens is you idolize the expert. Okay, I have a law degree from Georgetown. I also have a master's in social work, so I spent a lot of time in school. And one of the things they teach you in school is that only someone who has the degree that you do can be an expert in the area that you're an expert. And then once you get that degree, you usually need to get a credential, licensing, certification from authority. And once you have that, you become an expert. But if anybody who is not an expert tries to tell you about anything, you're going to reject it if it contradicts what the experts and authority are
Right?
telling you. So what ended up happening after my boyfriend asked me that question about the water is it drove my cognitive dissonance, which we hear this a lot. Oh, Democrats are so hypocritical. They believe this on the one hand and that on the other. Can't they tell that these two things don't go together? And the answer is no, because if the party or an expert told them that these two things are both true, they will hold them to be both true. I mean, this is straight out of Orwell's 1984, by the way. The party told you this, the party told you that. Both of those things can't be true, but you think they are because you don't question what authority told you. So when he asked that question about the water, it pushed my cognitive dissonance to the point that I allowed myself to think again. It caused my brain to break almost because I couldn't hold the two ideas together
Right.
anymore. And it was really that. And then after he asked me that question, he said, "Prove me wrong. Get the receipts. Do the research. Prove me wrong." And I think I screamed at him, "Fine, I will." And then I started allowing myself to look at other news sources, to stop trusting the fact checks, which are paid for by USAID and the State Department
Exactly.
and the other people who are controlling the narrative. And I start to ask questions again myself. And that's really what helped me to break free. And I think an important point I like to raise to people is that it really does seem like people on the left lack common sense, or as other people will say, are really stupid,
Right.
like, boy, they're so stupid. It's not that. It's that they are completely brainwashed and they don't have any idea that they have been indoctrinated and brainwashed. And actually, the smarter you are, the more reinforcement you get in school about it, the easier it is to actually brainwash you.
Exactly. So, with all of that said, I mean, it was quite an ordeal. I'm sure a lot of other people are going through some of this right now. I mean, we did have a lot of people switch on November 5th at the last election, and maybe shortly there before that never thought that they would see the other side of things. And for some reason, the other side of things is a bad side. I don't know why that is necessarily, just because they say so. But I think that one person at a time, I mean, is really all we can hope for. The propaganda is real, certainly. Kelly John, we also
100%.
talked on that in our last, when they're repeating everything and they're calling people, in his case, domestic terrorists at the school board meetings, protecting their kids, and they say it over and over for days on end, like it's a thing or a fact. People just, I guess, jump on the bandwagon, and we're all guilty of it. We see a story and we repost, and we don't really even go look back at the source. And I learned that today from Robert. She lives still alive in the back there, and my producer, who mentioned something about sourcing, information. And so we don't do that. We just assume what we see is true, and then we just pass it on and we make it more true. And it's important for people to hear different sides of things and, you know, put their tentacles out a little bit further than their immediate bubble so that they can get different information. And then maybe, like you, eventually come to a point where you're deciding to change your mind. And that's not a bad thing. So, what do you think between then, when you were entrenched in that lifestyle, and you saw it changing for the worse, I think, and then now you live in a beautiful rural area. My understanding is you have a farm. We're going to talk on that too. I want to hear a little bit about that, but you've really shifted
Sure.
your lifestyle from Washington to, probably serenity. And what have you noticed the most, whether it's personally or your friends or your lifestyle, your speed of life, that is significant?
Ah, it is like night and day. It is very, very, very different. I would say I've had been rough adapting, because my entire self-identity, my confidence, my sense of self was wrapped up in politics and my work. And I think that, you know, um people on the right, conservatives and independent thinkers, are not wrong when they say that people on the left think they are better than people on the right. They think they are morally superior. They think they are smarter. And so, I had to come to terms with the fact that all these people who are now my neighbors and my friends uh, were people that I used to not speak so kindly about. And I have to say that the people, since I have woken up and since I have um, moved to the country, the people could not be nicer. I have been welcomed. And I think I'm not so sure that conservatives who might switch would get such a warm welcome from the other side. I think too, one of the things that another difference that makes people that I talk about in the book, Deprogramming Democrats, that makes them easier to sort of brainwash is that they really, really care about what other people think of them, and especially other people who are like them. And they
Right.
really need external validation in order to get their sense of self. I'll say it again. I think part of that comes from their lack of faith. When you believe in God and God has your back and accepts you and you have God's love, you're not searching it for it from somewhere else in the same way that you might be if you don't have that. And so being willing to stand up and say something that contradicts the narrative, and as you rightly pointed out, that is repeated over and over to you from all sides, your social media, your regular media, your fact checkers, is very challenging for someone who's on the left. And so it took a long time. It took finding my faith, and it took a long time for me to be willing to not really care what anyone thinks of me, and to stand up to say what is right. Now that I do, it's very freeing. I feel my mind is my own for the first time. I went and gave a talk at a conference, and for the very first time in my life, that talk was what Lisa wanted to say, and not what an organization who was on Democratic, or some nonprofits were ostensibly nonpartisan, but they were always trying to grow government programs, which makes them, aligned with Democrats. But this was Lisa talking, and there is some nervousness when it's it's just you. This is your idea. These are your thoughts. But it is also extremely freeing. And so I love living in the country. I don't think I could ever go back to a city. I raise chickens and I grow organic fruits and vegetables. And, I've learned so many homesteading skills. I make my own kombucha. I ferment my own kombucha. I bake
Ooh,
my own bread. I do all those things. And there's a lot of reward in being able to do that. I did lose all my old friends, and I have lost touch with a lot of family because um, it, I think much more so on the left because of identity politics and the other things that go on there. It is so much of people's identity that it becomes challenging to maintain those relationships. And I also think it becomes challenging to maintain relationships with people who are not awake, who don't see the truth.
right.
Um, you can't really have open, honest conversations with them. Um, and there's a whole chapter in the book um, on propaganda and censorship. And propaganda is not just through news channels, it's through television programs,
Right.
it's through movies, it's through all
Any
of
medium,
popular
all the
culture.
mediums. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And when you realize they're all owned by six companies now, all of
Right.
them,
Right.
it's easy to put out the same message, right? But I used to watch TV a lot. I don't watch it at all anymore because all I see is the propaganda now. I don't
Exactly.
enjoy it. Well, the propaganda and the pharmaceutical ads, because that's about all you see, right? But and then you go when you when you talk to people who aren't awake, oh, did you watch that TV show? No, I'm sorry, I didn't, you know? And so you don't have as much in common with them as you used to.
It's
So,
true. It's true.
um,
The mindless stuff we put in our minds that called TV is, or cable, I guess now, is not really something to sustain your life on with your relationships. So I applaud you for cutting that out because it's an addiction for sure, that we all are, a lot of us are still suffer from that addiction. But you're right, it's not healthy and it's not new information. And like I said earlier with Kelly John, I mean, anyone who has a live streaming platform these days or show anywhere here or there, hopefully the goal would be to share the information widely, different information, not the same information that both sides, frankly, shares all the time. And even the channels I watch more of, I watch all the channels, but it's this the same information, the same story. Sometimes it's to the point where you think, really, that's the only story happening today. Like that, it seems unlikely that it all boils down to three main topics per day, and that's what runs, morning show till Gutfeld comes on because he is funny. And it's a fun way to
yeah,
end
he
your day is
is
laughing. It's fun to laugh. So you got to find those shows too that make you laugh. And
100%.
yeah, so when talking about, the changes in that and seeing all of that happening, and what about like your family and friends? I mean, obviously those in the work world, and maybe you're still friends with some of them, it's possible for sure. But your family, especially, you hear a lot about that going by the wayside and parents and kids splitting and spouses too, I think has happened. Have you experienced much of that? Hopefully not.
Um, most of my friends I no longer talk to. And especially I don't really talk to any of my former colleagues. I did have one who she seemed to like start waking up when I woke up, and then she got offered a really good job that pulled her right back into the machine, right back into the matrix. So she and I no longer talk. I'm fortunate that well, I lost my parents, as I said.
Yeah,
I have two siblings, and I still have great relationships with both of them.
well, that's
Um,
good. I mean, it's important
I
to keep those
yeah,
active and work through them. Sometimes, if it's family, I think a lot of people will just cut a friend loose. And I don't understand that, but it's easier to do perhaps from one side or the other. But family, I mean, that is all you have at the end of the day. So I think it is really important, as difficult as it may be in these circumstances where they've pitted people against each other through COVID and through the propaganda and through the masks and through the indoctrination and all the issues that one group of people don't appreciate. They've divided these families. So I think it is important if you can maintain those relationships. We don't want them to divide us. That's how they conquer us. And so it's important to keep those units together, I think.
100%. You are 100% right. Divide and conquer is the oldest control strategy, and we see it everywhere. We see it with black and white. We see it with left and right. And, the way I hear it talked about is we are, it's really not about left and right. It's establishment. It is versus we the people. It is the people who have corrupted our amazing constitutional republic, on both the left and the right. And federal government that I worked so many years to help grow, I will sadly admit, but that it is about, they are the left and white or right wings of the same bird. And,
Exactly.
that bird is not in the interest of the people. It is about power and money for them. And the people that they serve, which includes, the military industrial complex, the medical pharmaceutical complex that I talked about earlier.
Right.
And
And, Eli Lilly is making a huge investment. Did you hear 72 billion or 172, a lot of money. And I don't want to quote the number because I just heard it briefly this morning. But in a way, I thought, I mean, that's yes, good. They're going to manufacture the drugs here versus China when you couldn't, get an aspirin or whatever blood pressure medicine for a while. It was a problem. They were could have held it hostage. So good on that respect because you can't just take everybody off everything immediately. But also, I thought, hmm. I mean, do we really want to incentivize them to build all these plants to keep pumping out all these new drugs, a new drug every 3 days? If you hear the commercials, I always think to myself, I think I'm going to start doing a section on the drugs in America. We'll just break down one by one because there's so many. And every week they have a new drug with a new name. And I'm thinking, who is sitting around getting paid to name these drugs? First of all, they're just absurd names. They just keep slapping extra letters on them and putting them out again, recirculating them for another type of an illness that it touches on. So it treats five different things, which I know some could argue is good, but I don't know. It just feels to me like we don't want to encourage more of that manufacturing. We want to get step back from it. So I would love for them to put the money in the country, but let's stop producing so many chemical drugs for our systems. I just don't think it's healthy at the end of the day for a lot of things. But so I do agree with you 100% on all of that, actually. And was there ever a time too where like you and your friends when you were still in it? I mean, what was that like? Do you ever think back and say, wow, we'd go to lunch and wow, we'd be talking about this? Do you ever think to yourself, "Oh, I can't believe that I had those conversations or that train of thought?"
I 100% do, and I mean, this is a big one. I think there's a couple of examples I can give you that now I just go, wow, how could I have thought that? Well, one of the, you know, one of the things is sort of modern monetary theory where you can just spend and spend and spend, and it doesn't really have an impact. And also we can just tax the rich people and then we'll be fine, those kind of things, which belies a very non-understanding of economics. But I think as we found out with all of the COVID spending, where all the money just appeared out of nowhere to fund all of these programs, you can't keep doing that because what you do is you devalue the currency, right? And then inflation happens. So we used to sit around and we didn't care about spending. We thought you could just keep spending and spending and spending. And I step back and say, that doesn't make any sense anymore, to me. And then I've also met so many people now who, we would always say, oh, well, I don't mind paying a little more taxes so that I can have whatever program it was that we were trying to fund, or those kind of things. But I've met so many people now moving to the country that actually $5 more a week in taxes might mean that they can't afford one of their meals that week. And, obviously we weren't thinking of that person. We didn't know anybody like that because you
Right.
do live in your DC bubble. And $5 is, not really a week, would not be something that you would even notice coming out of your check.
Sure.
But, um, and I did a lot of work on the Social Security disability program, and um, there are a lot of people I've met who would never apply for a government benefit, never, no matter what. They would rely on friends, family, community, church,
Exactly.
and not go through the government. And we, again, moral superiority, we know better than you do because we're the educated elites in the district, in District 1, as I sometimes call it, with a shout out to the Hunger Games. But
Right. Yes. That
in the
does.
district, and we get to, now I forgot what my point was. So we're the um
That was a good point. The Hunger Games. That
the,
actually was a good
it
point.
is, yeah, but we can, we're gonna tell you what your best interests are. We're gonna tell you, even though I've never met you and I don't, you know, a favorite thing people would pick on people who live in trailer parks. Well, I know lots of people now who do live in trailer parks. They're great people. They work really hard, and they would never go in and apply for a government benefit. And to tell them that we have a right to take more of your money to create this program that we think is better for you, that is something I can't even imagine that I would do now. But I remember having lots of conversations where those kinds of ideas are talked about because we know better,
That's right. Yeah, that's really
and
important when
that
you think of it like that, all those little nuances and how it does affect everyone, you know. They're living their lives and there's nothing wrong if you can't say nobody deserves any help. There are some circumstances these days created by our own government that causes people to need help. And we don't want to not have any support services. I mean, we are the most supportive country in the history of countries. And so we're not going to just cease being supportive, certainly of our own citizens, but there is a fine line between overly supportive and enabling. And our government tends to, well, one side of the government, I would say your former side of the government, does tend to like the reliability the money brings to the citizens on them because also that also provides control. And ultimately, they just want you to get your check, your weekly check, whatever you get, and your food stamps, and just go about your business and leave them to do whatever they want to do, spending all your money, billions and trillions and zillions of dollars across in Colombia, Venezuela, countries nobody has ever heard of until this last week or two. And hope that you guys don't nobody notices. That's really what they want, I think, at the end of the day. So one person at a time recognizing this, and now you wrote your book, um, the deprogramming Democrats and uneducating the elites. So that's this type of resources, firsthand knowledge. You lived it, you breathed it, it encompassed your entire existence for years on that side, would be a great resource for people who question that any of this is questionable. You just have to read about it from people or listen to shows like this and hear firsthand what they've experienced. And just because it's not your experience doesn't mean it's not true or didn't happen to somebody else. Everybody conflates, I think, well, that can't be true. Like it never happened to me, so it can't be true, right? I don't know anybody this has happened to either, so it can't be true. But it is true. Kelly's story is true about parents,
it
the
is, yeah.
DOJ coming after them, and you having the realization after years of being entrenched in that culture and watching it go, downhill. These are things that happen, and it's important people learn about them so that if they're experiencing it, or they know somebody who is, or did they want to have just a better understanding of their fellow citizen, their neighbors, all those reasons are good reasons to learn from people like you who've experienced these sorts of things with our government. I mean, it's crazy when you talk about it. It's what's crazy is that we can talk about all of these things about our government, and our government seems to play a very negative role in so many aspects of our lives when we discuss them out loud. That's what I think is crazy. It's not just this.
And that, yeah, it is crazy. And, I think I agree with you. We need systems to support people, but I would encourage, like what I was saying before about returning power to the states. I think that the people in your community and in your state have a lot better idea of what you need than the bureaucrats in Washington do. I
Definitely.
know that to be the case from living there for 20 years. I can tell you that if you live in rural Alabama, the people in Washington, D.C., even the people who are representing you there because they've been in D.C. for so long, don't have a clue what you actually need or what your daily life is actually like.
That's right.
So reclaiming the power back to the states makes a ton of sense. The other thing I would say the book would be really good for is someone who has a loved one who either they think might possibly be open to waking up, there are some good suggestions, and I can give one here. What my main is for people to consider, and that is to use the Socratic method. And the Socratic method means ask questions. Ask them questions. Don't try to tell them anything. Ask them about um, things that one of the things that happens to a lot of people on the left, you see they're very angry these days. They
Yeah,
yell a lot, they call you names. Well, they're very compassionate, but fear has been used to manipulate that compassion and weaponize it into anger. And so try to access their actual compassion. Try to understand where they're coming from because it validates them, but it also, what you're trying to do is push the cognitive dissonance to the point where their brain breaks, like mine did, can't hold those two ideas anymore, but also to give themselves permission to ask questions themselves again. And
right.
so, um, you know, that is um, the main advice. But the hard part is when you ask the question, it can't presuppose an answer or contain what you believe are facts. Because if it presupposes an answer, you're not the expert. The expert told them something else. The authority told them something else. So, you know, like for example, I'll use one that is one that I talk a lot about in the book and also is really important these days. Thank goodness President Trump issued the executive order saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman,
Right.
but we still are facing that. And so asking, something like, so, I'm really interested to understand where you got your information about suicide and transgendered youth. Because the truth is, there are no studies that show that transgendered youth will kill themselves if they don't get quote unquote gender affirming care. And there are actually several studies that show post surgery they're much more likely to kill themselves. So
Exactly.
by asking that question, you're showing, I think you're important. I want to know what, but you're also raising an issue that if they did actually go and look, they will find out that what they've been told is lies. So
Right.
that's an example. It also shows that they believe that people on the right don't care about someone who might be having these um what I would call normal feelings about being uncomfortable in your body that we all go through when we go through puberty. And,
Right.
all of us, I was a tomboy,
And
so
menopause again
I
later.
might have been, yeah, exactly.
Like,
And yeah, no doubt about
like,
that.
like
Yeah.
forever. Like, yeah, we got that short end of that stick for sure at the beginning and the end of our lives. So, yeah, no, the changes are real. It's a real
They
thing.
are definitely
That's a
real.
lot of adjustments going on all the time.
And so, but it shows that you also care about those kids too, and so it counters the narrative without trying to tell them something. So that's just an example, and in the book I give other, tips about how to wake yourself up, how to also, talk to someone who you might want to wake up. And, I'm always also happy to talk to anybody who is waking up or is trying to wake someone up, and kind of talk through how you might do that. And you can get in touch with me through my website, which is deprogrammingdemocrats.com,
Right.
or through X, I am deprogrammed dem.
And we have that at the bottom of the screen too. And it's in, if it's not yet, I think it's in all my descriptions on Patriot_Mom007 at YouTube, Rumble, Facebook. I don't think my Facebook Live went out today for some reason. Something's going on in the system inside the small box that controls our lives. And I wasn't able to task and fix it quick enough. So it might not be on Facebook today. Your information is, though. But we definitely want to get our hands on information like this, learn about our neighbors who are now our friends, and not because they changed their mind, just because their change of mind aligns more closely with ours now. And that's not a good or bad thing. That's just what happened to Lisa, and we don't need to judge her on the change. It's just that's her decision. And so we're happy to have you. And we're glad to know that there's one less person working against us in the government. So that's also very positive to hear, because you guys sure do band together when you want to. That's something you guys have going for you. You guys are definitely you get in that cohesive pack for sure. And that's, I
Well,
guess,
that's that cult mentality. It is.
yeah, you hear
And
people chanting and you're like, wow, they sound an awful lot like each other.
yeah, if you've never heard this saying, a couple of people haven't, vote blue no matter who.
Yes, yes, it's very catchy and very true, and it's very bad overall. I mean, you cannot just
Yeah.
vote. We do say, people will say vote red. Now, I guess one thing about that, it is true, but it also, I can see both sides of that because if you're really ingrained in what you believe and you want everyone around you to emulate that in a leadership capacity in local or federal government, I mean, that is probably what makes sense, right? Is you do want to vote blue no matter who, because the alternative is, by your standard, just not going to meet your expectations, whether it's little expectations or what big expectations. They just won't meet, that person won't meet them. So there's some truth in that, I suppose, but you always can look to change your perspective. On American perspective here, I got to work that in today. I never
Yay.
haven't
Good
before,
job.
but it is about our perspectives, right? And they do shape our not only our personal lives like they did for you and your family and now on the farm, which glad you have your chickens because apparently Biden killed off the billions of them just before he left office. So thank heaven some people need to have their own for sure. We don't have a shortage of eggs here. They're actually in every store in America. So those few alerts you hear around the country, it's not an, I haven't seen anything in Arizona, so we're good. I don't think it's quite as bad as they say. And I think we're at like 389 or 429 a dozen. Also not
Oh,
horrible. Not
no,
horrible.
yeah, we're here at I was at Walmart the other day just to pick up something real quick and looked at the eggs and $6 a dozen.
Well, we might be at four. Yeah, I think we're at four. So, but still, some people say nine and you can't find them anywhere. Now, that's probably possible. It's very possible in that region. But always and never are never things that words we should use, right? Always and never. I just used it. But Lisa, everybody should find you. You also have Apple Podcast. You have Deprogramming Democrats on your Apple Podcast. And of course, your website we gave out, deprogrammingdemocrats.com. They can get you if you'd like to connect with Lisa, info@deprogrammingdemocrats.info. You can find her on X at deprogrammeddem. All of this is or should be in the description. If it's not, it will be. I'll double check. But we just want to thank you, Lisa, for coming on. And it's so nice to meet you in pseudo person, not
You
truly
as well.
person, but close as we're going to get right now. So
Yes,
thank you,
ma'am.
Debbie. If Debbie's listening, our friend Debbie out here, wonderful photographer. Oh, darn, I wish I had her website. I would say it out loud. I don't, but we'll put it up too as a favor. So she's an amazing photographer here locally. She introduced us and connected with you earlier or later last year. So we're happy she did. And we hope it all goes well for you on the farm and you lead a beautiful, peaceful life like it sounds that you've created for yourself now. So thanks for being on American Perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if you want to hang out in the back, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
So you guys, wow, quick hours, 2:29. Oh my gosh. I was actually thinking I had like 6 minutes left. So what we're gonna do now is I was gonna do something with Debbie Lesko happen here in Arizona, but we'll do it next week. Maybe I'll do a few graphics instead of just one or two. But a lot to hear from our guests, and that's the most important part is their information, what they've experienced, and what we can share with you about that. And maybe it'll change your perspective as well, not just your American perspective, but all of them. And so we are going to end with our MAGA Minute on this hour too. Carolyn Levitt puts it together every week for us, and we're grateful to her. Thank you. And here we go again with what happened last week on 228 week. So let's bring that one up, Robert. And it should be coming up anytime now. But if it's not, for whatever reason, I sure do. Well, let's
It was
see.
another historic
There he
week
goes.
at the White House. Let's break it all down in the MAGA Minute. President Trump showed the world what American strength looks like when he stood up for the American people to President Zelensky during their meeting in the Oval Office. Massive corporations announced new investments and jobs in the United States. Following President Trump's 10% tariff on China, Apple announced it will spend more than $500 billion and hire 20,000 American workers over the next 4 years. Pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly announced an investment of $27 billion to build 4 new manufacturing plants in the United States. On the border, the administration has officially deported more than 50,000 illegal immigrants from our country, a 627% increase in monthly arrests under Joe Biden. Mexico also extradited 29 vicious and violent cartel criminals to the United States to face their long-awaited justice. And the president signed an executive order to make the prices of medical services more transparent, unlocking huge healthcare savings opportunities for you, the American people. And lastly, we took a historic step towards restoring your trust in the mainstream media by saying the White House Correspondents Association is no longer going to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office and fly on Air Force One. New media is traveling with the president, covering this president. It was a great week, and we'll see you next time for the MAGA Minute.
All right. Thanks, Carolyn. She's so helpful for my Friday wrap-up shows because she wraps it up so nicely for us on, letting the press back in, the press room, the briefings. Bravo. They had suspended the numbers, several hundred journalists at the Biden administration who were their credentials were taken from them, and those have been restored or being restored. And then they've opened it up to so many other journalists and independent journalists, which is so important, not just the top, three. And of course, Zelensky, we heard that in the wrap up too. I mean, we had quite a little tussle in the Oval Office the other day at the meeting. But then 2 days later, and a lot of people came back. Actually, some people wrote me and brought up Zelensky and not treating our neighbors very neighborly. But after $175 billion, pretty neighborly gesture. I mean, it's more than a cup of sugar for sure. So I think we were treating them fairly. But lo and behold, within 48 hours, President Zelensky came to his senses and realized that if he doesn't get all the money to line his pockets and buy more houses and fly around the world regularly instead of holding Zoom meetings from his war-torn country, actively being shot at, that he might as well get on board with the peace train because if money's not coming, then why, I mean, what has he got left? He might as well just settle, right? So, for whatever reason, he changed his mind. Good job, President Trump, moving him in that direction. Some people thought abruptly, I thought effectively. So we're grateful that peace is hopefully coming and that continues through the process of what you're trying to accomplish, which is nobody dying anywhere, for these silly reasons that nobody even knows why they're fighting. So let's stop that. Overall, I think that's a good thing. Anyone who says it isn't, I would love to hear your comments as to why that would not be a good thing to stop the killing of innocent civilians. So, you guys, another hour by Friday, March 7th. This is American Perspective with Patriot Mom007. You guys, if you can follow me, I sure would appreciate it on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube or Rumble Truth. I'm trying to get on board with them. And on X, it's at PMom007. I also want to thank Robert, Chula Vista Live Data. You can find him, and he has other channels. He works with a lot of different streamers. So you're going to want to check out his work at JData17 on X and on Facebook. So check out those when you get a chance. There's always a lot to see, and we appreciate what he does. We couldn't do it without him here. And then also just remember, wherever you live, whatever you do for a living, whatever your situation is, if you don't know what's happening around you, at least a general sense of it, you really can't make a positive change or affect anything for yourself, your family, or friends, positively going forward. So I encourage you to find the resources, whether it's here, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on C-SPAN 1 or 2. You can watch those live every day. I highly encourage that. You can see people in action, the ones you're paying, they're your employees. It's like a closed circuit TV. in your company. That's what it's like in C-SPAN 1 and 2. And you can see what they're doing if they're really doing the tasks you have provided them on their list of to-dos to get things done for you and your family and the country. So we really appreciate you guys watching American Perspective today. We do hope to see you back. Please like, comment, share when you ever see our posts. We're new. We're trying to grow. And I appreciate Kelly John's support always. Lisa Ekman, also a great guest and author, and probably also a friend. Now that we know each other, we have similar friends, and that's how that goes. So have a great weekend, everyone. I look forward to seeing you guys back here again for my American Perspective next week.